We are back inside City Hall. We've been talking about the state budget, but now let's turn our attention to a moment that matters in a different capital, Washington, D.C. Last week, longtime Senate Democratic leader Harry Reid announced his own retirement and quickly anointed New York senior Senator Chuck Schumer as his preferred successor when Reid leaves office in 2017. Now, Schumer says he has the support of his peers who are focused on regaining control of the Senate next year.
I am humbled, gratified by the overwhelming support that my colleagues have shown me in recent days, and I will do my best to make New York, our country, and my colleagues proud. And I want to tell my constituents, my dearly beloved New Yorkers, that I will continue to work as hard as I always have for New York.
A solemn pledge, but it's a long way from here to 2017. We've got four top strategists here to talk about this and more. Republicans Kellyanne, Conway, and Menges. Democrats George Arzt and Neal Kwatra. Good to see everybody. And we asked you to grade the likelihood that in this long, an eternity in politics and so forth and so on, but how likely is it, do you think, that Chuck Schumer becomes majority leader? Let's start with you, Kellyanne.
I gave it a D, meaning not very likely that he's majority leader. The country was very clear in 2014 about the type of United States Senate and, in fact, federal Congress they wanted, mostly as a check and balance on President Obama's runaway liberal policies. They didn't like Obamacare, they don't like the Common Core, they don't like federal overreach of any type. And so they pushed back on that and elected a Republican Senate for the first time since 2006. Don't see that changing. If, in fact, Chuck Schumer is elected the Senate majority leader in by 2017, it means that Hillary Clinton suffered a major defeat and a Republican won so strongly, a conservative won so strongly that folks want to have a check and balance on that conservative. So I'm not sure a lot of New Yorkers want to wish for that.
So even with Republican senators defending 24 seats next year and Democrats defending 10, you think the Republicans pull it out?
I do, because people say they love to revolutionize and change all the time, but they also, in politics, inertia is the most powerful physical force unless and until overtaken by friction. Overtaken by friction. And friction doesn't come every election cycle, particularly at the Senate and House level. Folks tend to stick with what they know. There are some seats that will be in play, no question, for Republicans. There may be some retirements. Those are always big surprises. But even as smart and savvy as a politician that Chuck Schumer is, and he is. I've enjoyed talking to him over the years about politics. I don't see that happening for the Democrats, particularly in a presidential year when they're not blessed with Hillary, they're kind of stuck with her.
Okay, George Arzt, your grade and analysis.
I gave it a C because I think it's unlikely the Democrats will take over, particularly because there are 24 Republicans who they would have to unseat. I think this is a tough fight, but with Hillary at the top of the ticket and well, I think there's there's a chance, but not likely.
Now, what do you think of Chuck Schumer as, let's say he's minority conference leader, of him doing the kind of obstruction that one sees sometimes? Because that's really one of the most powerful weapons that a Senate minority conference has, to filibuster, to drag things out.
I just don't see him doing that. I think he's more of a cross-the-aisle guy. He will try to get things done. Chuck is about getting coalitions together, and that's what he's famous for. He'll also be out there in the hustings really trying to get a Democratic majority. He's a fierce campaigner, as we all know in New York.
Indeed. Jake?
I give him a D. I don't think he's going to be the minority leader, but he's certainly the guy to get them there and get them closer. He's brilliant at political warfare, and you're right. He is a guy that reaches across the aisle. It's a great move. We know the Democratic message will be focused and disciplined, and there'll be certainly lots of money to back it up. So it's a great move on the Democrats' part.
Okay, so Neal, everybody's all this gloom and doom at the table. Bring us a note of cheer for Chuck Schumer.
I beg to differ respectfully with my colleagues. 24 states, as you point out, but more importantly, 7 of those 24 states are states that President Obama carried twice. So you've got 7 states that are quite hospitable. They're going to have very competitive candidates. States like Iowa and New Hampshire, also states like Ohio, Wisconsin, Florida. you're going to have Democrats field very competitive candidates. And I think Chuck Schumer, a former head of the DSCC, knows these races, knows these candidates, and knows these states, notwithstanding the fact that Democrats are going to benefit with a presidential year electorate. We all know it's a more favorable electorate for Democrats. I think that'll be the difference. I think Chuck Schumer is your majority leader in 2017.
Is it favorable for Democrats even with Hillary at the top and accounting for things like Clinton fatigue?
Absolutely. I think when you look at voting patterns and you look at sort of the base of the Republican vote and you look at the Electoral College, we know the states that are going to be competitive and we know the states that are going to be reliably red and reliably blue. So I feel more than confident having someone like Hillary Clinton at the top of the ticket, and with someone, a tactician and strategist like Chuck Schumer, that's a fantastic combination for Democrats.
Schumer's far more skilled than Hillary Clinton, and I think more affable and more in the game for modern political warfare, if you will. I mean, he just is, he's been in the trenches for that long. She's been out of it, and I think it shows. I mean, recently she had that press conference. She's reading prepared remarks from a binder, and she still flubbed her lines somehow. I think it's easy to outshine Hillary, and you're going to have, if you, as you say, Neal, Democrats field really good candidates for these Senate seats, it's going to be very easy for them to outshine and thereby distance themselves from Hillary Clinton. But George made an excellent point. He was talking about how Chuck Schumer taking the reins, it's huge for him, it's huge for New York. It's very fascinating that Harry Reid basically designated Chuck Schumer as his heir, since Dick Durbin, the senator from Illinois, has been the #2 for almost a decade with Harry Reid. So why does he pick Schumer? Schumer is going to do what Harry Reid did not do, which is actually make the Senate work, either as a minority leader with Mitch McConnell in the majority or as the majority leader someday. I hope not. But if he gets there, I think he'll make the Senate work, and Harry Reid's legacy will not be remembered for helping to make the Senate work. He in fact changed the rules if he needed to, constantly was the obstructionist in chief, playing block and tackle for President Obama. And I think Durbin would have been much the same way, and Schumer can almost outshine Reid from the beginning.
Harry Reid is a good technician behind the scenes. Schumer is a guy who's way out front. He's not going to give up his Sunday press conferences.
No, broadcast is the right word.
Broadcast. But he's a guy that can do both. He can be the technician out there, and he can be in front. I would be, if I were a Republican, I'd be very afraid of how much attention Chuck Schumer can garner.
And money he can raise.
Yes.
Don't forget.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at the amount of money raised by incumbent senators. There's only one Democrat in the top 10, and that is Chuck Schumer with $13 million on hand. Let's take a short break. We'll be back with these fine consultants in just a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back to Inside City Hall. We're talking with the 4 members of our Consultants Corner, Republicans Kellyanne, Conway, and Jake Menges, Democrats George Arzt and Neal Kwatra. And we have a budget. I guess they're passing it tonight or something like that. The Governor Cuomo, said that he was going to push through a lot of substantive legislation by tying it into the budget. In the end, he did not, but he did get his 5th on-time budget. Was that inevitable? I tend to trust his vote counting skills, so if he says he couldn't have gotten it any other way, I tend to believe him, but maybe I'm missing something. What do you think?
Yes, so I think he's able to say that for the first time since, what, 1972 or so, you've had 5 in a row and good credit rating. But he lost a lot, too. You know, he and the mayor did not get their way with minimum wage. I think that's a huge victory for Republicans. And also, I think the reaction to the Shelley Silver scandal and like scandals, not that he's the only one, was so robust in Albany that almost all of the key legislation was tied to that. More transparency on your income if you're a state legislature. Taking out the pensions for folks who are convicted, the voters will have to approve of that. But then we don't have the power to fire teachers, I think ill-performing teachers, the way some people were hoping to get in there. So I think the governor can claim a lot of victories if you don't know what he left on the table.
There's a give and go on every budget. So you're going to come into the budget and you know that the Senate wants something, the other house wants something, and then you want something. So you're going to take what you can get. He got ethics, he got education, and some things drop out. Minimum wage, DREAM Act, that's part of the process. And And perhaps there are some things maybe that the governor didn't really want. And that drops out of the process.
Having said that, I mean, minimum wage and issues like the DREAM Act that weren't addressed can still be addressed. We have a few months left in the session. Yes, it wasn't dealt with in the budget, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to be dealt with. I would disagree with Kellyanne. I don't think it's a victory for Republicans that not only minimum wage didn't get addressed, but ultimately I don't think it's a winning issue for Republicans. You look at public polling, independents support an increase in the minimum wage by 70%, Democrats 90%, even Republicans.
They must not own small businesses.
It's almost, actually most small businesses. Almost 50% of Republicans support raising the minimum wage. So it's a losing issue for Senate Republicans, as is the DREAM Act. We know, you want to talk about economics, we know that immigration is a net positive for our economy, from everything from wages to GDP. We know it creates jobs. We know it helps create housing. We know it helps create new construction. These are all things. In Long Island, you have 17% of the island are immigrant. You have a huge percentage of small businesses on Long Island run by immigrants. This is the future.
Are you suggesting
That's
this
how
is
the
going to
DREAM
cost
Act
the
is.
Senate Republicans
I
next
think
year?
it absolutely will cost Senate Republicans. The minimum wage and the DREAM Act, if there is not action on both of those issues in 2016, those issues will be issues Democrats run on. Now, I'm hopeful that this legislature and this governor, which I feel very confident, will, in the remaining parts of this session, fight hard on both of those issues. In terms of what else the governor got out of this session, he got a landmark ethics package. Notwithstanding any complaints from critics, this is a leap forward. For the first time, legislators will have to disclose money that they make outside of their legislative job. That sounds like it should have been a law a long time ago, but having said that, it wasn't, and now it is. And that's because this governor, on the objections of the Senate Republicans who fought this tooth and nail, if we're to believe the press reports about this, because most Senate Republicans also have jobs at law firms.
So I think I disagree a little bit. I think the New York taxpayers and the New York students lost out on this thing. I think the governor, the teachers union once again beat their opposition into submission and blew up any chance of real reform or accountability. I think that the governor missed a great opportunity with people to support him to really pass real ethics reform. I think Schneiderman had it right today, which is, why are we nibbling around the edges? We ought to say no outside income, full-time positions, and let's tell these guys, you get convicted of a crime of corruption, you're going to lose your pension. And I think...
I mean, I hear you, with all due respect to my former employer. The fact of the matter is, nothing in legislation or politics is perfect. This was a leap forward. The Democrats were in control of the Senate, the Assembly, and the governor's mansion. In the last 7-8 years, they didn't pass ethics legislation. We have a recalcitrant Senate Republican caucus that resisted everything that this governor put forward. I think what we got was significant. Is there more to do? No question about it.
But everybody knows the odd confluence of events here, where you had a Democratic speaker, Shelley Silver, being the catalyst for all of this ethics reform, no doubt about it. And so, it's a little high-minded and wholly inaccurate to blame Republicans for not doing enough when really most of the focus was on this ethics package because of what a Democratic Assembly member finally got booted out, and I hope is on his way to jail. You just can't ignore that. And I think if you're going to play partisan politics and quote statistics, you really have to talk about how this budget is fundamentally different from past budgets just because of what finally happened. I didn't know if we'd all live to see the day of the guy leaving, but I hope it shows a huge message, because people thought that guy could not be toppled, that he would be there forever. Everybody looked the other way or paid more to the piper. And I think it's a great day for New York that way. I can't understand how these guys live with themselves in always giving school children the shaft, though. I think it's a complete disgrace. It is a complete disgrace.
At least I have it. I don't know if everybody else has seen all the budget language that's come out on education. We're saying here that it's half a loaf. I think we should wait and see exactly what the language is before we start criticizing. I, for one, haven't seen the language. I've seen reports about certain things that...
Well, the legislators haven't seen the language. Nobody's seen the language.
Right, but so how do we... well, I agree.
A lot of it's going to go back to state ed to write.
Well, that's right. Exactly right. That's one thing we know, is that a lot of these things are going to get negotiated. So there was a sort of a kick the can there, as on many other issues. Thank you all so much for coming by tonight. Always great to talk with you. Let's take a short break now. I'll be back with a preview of tomorrow night's program in just a minute. Stay with us.